Beautiful. How are you doing?
Awesome, man. Really happy to be here on the island.
I mean, I cannot believe I'm so jealous.
Yeah, I tried to give you the background so your viewers can get just the feeling of how alive and rich it is here.
I was there in October actually for 2 weeks.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Yeah. What part of the island are you on?
North Shore, we have dear friends in Kilauea Farms. We've been kind of like my wife and I don't have kids, but we've been knowing them since they first had their kids. So we try to come every winter, not just for the surf, but to kind of see our surrogate family. We
What a setup. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, avocado trees all over. They're living such a pure, good life. No matter where we are in the world, like we always think, oh man, to get back there someday, that's the way to live, where you're just eating off the land and surfing every day.
Why don't you do it?
Yeah, I think we will. We've been through a lot. We've been in Patagonia. My wife's dad actually just passed. That's why we were able to come here, but he was on a really slow decline. He was all alone in the south of Patagonia. So we went to spend all of COVID with him. And now we're kind of, maybe we will end up back here. We'll see how it goes. I mean, Patagonia is pretty great too, but when you're a surfer and it's 2 hours and an hour ferry ride to get to the Pacific, it's a little frustrating.
Yeah. We say it as like it's a fantasy, like, oh, we would love to spend all of our time in Kauai. But when I actually think of the nuts and bolts, it's totally doable. It's
Yeah.
it's like a mental blockade for us to where we think we're anchored in Southern California because it's where our families are and it's where we've grown up and it just feels like we should stay here. But when I
Yeah.
really think about the moving parts, there's no reason why we couldn't. And you're absolutely right. It's such a better way of life. It's healthier. It's just better
Yeah.
in all ways.
As soon as I step off, I just feel like this jolt of goodness. Everything's so alive here. I mean, for me, I worked in the film industry for 20 years. And I also played poker for a living. And like Los Angeles, you couldn't make that work here in Kauai. But, if the movie does well, and maybe we'll end up locating here. It's certainly our happy place on Earth. Yeah.
Good. Maybe we'll be there then too. And you and I can, we can
Yeah.
get dinner. We can get
We
dinner
could
and
get we
hang.
could get we could get one of those parcels, and you have the mango trees, I'll have the avocado trees. A lot of co-ops around here in Kilauea do that, which I think is a nice way to live, like the old communal thing. Like, hey, my McNuts are ready. What do you guys have to trade? Like, it's a really cool thing.
100%. Your wife is actually from South Patagonia.
She actually grew up. Her dad is a Chilean, but she grew up in Argentina because of the political situation. He was a businessman, so they had to move the business. He worked for AstraZeneca. He was the CEO. So feels like an Argentine, but he retired back to Chile, and Patagonia was where he lived. So that's where we visited him in his old age. But she's like an Argentine through and through. Like now that they're playing for the World Cup, she's like super stoked. And like Argentines are like a whole like amped up, like Chileans are much more chill and reserved. Argentine is like a completely different culture. It's like someone from Texas versus someone from New York City, like
Right, right.
that big a difference. So
Is that area South Patagonia? Then it's got to be super remote, right?
yeah, it's out there. I mean, no movie theaters, 2 hours to the grove. We have like little mom and pop stores around, but to get a good restaurant, it's 2 hours. And but we're right on a lake, and it was perfect for COVID because you couldn't go anywhere anyway. And I have a dog there, beautiful lab named Maui, and we had a bunch of cats. It's a nice life. If I didn't
Nice.
surf, I think it could be the perfect life.
Yeah. No, I'm. Are you familiar with Chef's Table on Netflix?
Yeah, it's a great one.
That Francis
Yeah,
Mallman episode where it opens with
yeah,
him on the lake in Patagonia. That's what I'm
yeah.
thinking of.
Well, I had one of my best dinners was at his place in Mendoza. It was absolutely everything cooked on an open fire. Even the dessert was just these like hardcore roasted fruits that just no sugar, no nothing, just the fruits, but the way they were cooked, like completely ridiculous taste.
I
Yeah.
know. I love that show. And there will be obviously episodes with like super fine dining in New York City or wherever it is. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But when I see Mallman's episode, that's how I want to eat. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like
totally.
that. And I mean, I think he does the fine dining thing as well, but still the style of food that he's making is how I would prefer to eat for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I recommend his restaurant. If you ever get to Argentina and Mendoza, it's a wonderful place. I think he has a bunch around the world, but that's
Yeah, he does.
he was there that time, so it was a really special night.
Um, so I know you grew up in Connecticut.
I did, yeah,
At,
right on the
at what
beach.
I didn't realize. So are there waves in Connecticut?
Well, I was in like a frustrating situation because we were right on the sand. We were staring at Long Island. So there's like this sound between Connecticut and Long Island. So we would get like a hurricane twice in the summer, but I would be in the water every day, like fishing on boats. All friends had boats. Um, so anytime a swell came, I was just like so excited to body surf and just ride waves, you know? And we would get out to Montauk maybe once or twice a year, or Long Island, and I would just spend all day in the water. So I had like this building love for waves and surf and this love for the ocean. And I went to college in Australia, a place called Macquarie, for a semester. And luckily my roommate there was a surfer from Florida, and he took, we bought this like cheap little Sigma, and I learned to surf at Manly. Basically, I took all classes where I could just watch movies. So we could go off, I could watch a movie on my own and then file the report, but then we could just travel the coast. And I just took to it so quickly. I was a soccer player all through college and my youth. So I was really athletic, and I had that ocean experience. And after that semester, I just knew like I could never be away from the, it was like my Stoke years were my 20s, you know. So I first stood up at Manly, I was like 19, I think. And then immediately moved to Los Angeles and just became a regular, you know, Malibu and Doom and all the Northern LA breaks. I consider those my real, you know, my learning time. Yeah.
What were you studying in college in Australia?
Well, I got a full grant to this like pretty good liberal arts business school, but I knew I wanted to do film because I started writing at a really young age. But my mom was like, "Hey, you're stupid not to take this like free deal." I wanted to just go to LA and, you know, just throw caution to the wind and try to make it in the film industry. So we went to this school, but I was stuck in this like small town PA taking classes in like, you know, liberal arts, like stuff you had to take. They had a theater department and they had a writing department. But then when they said I could travel abroad, I got to do all film study. And then they let me finish at UCLA on this like program called the New York Film Academy, which was like this, just they give you a camera the first day, and they gave me like a whole semester of credits for doing
Wow.
that. So I milked it for what it was worth. But those years stuck in liberal arts PA, I realized like, man, like liberal arts education, I don't know who that's for. Like when you know what you want to do, like if I have kids, I'm going to say, hey, like if you know what you're going to do, don't waste that time in classrooms. Like go out and do it.
Yeah.
Um, but
What going back, even you said that growing up you wanted to get into film.
yeah,
Um, why? What about it?
I
What
just
was the
love
interest?
story from the early age. You know, my mom was a voracious reader. I was a reader as well. And then in the video generation, you know, on HBO, like it was just stories were able to transport you somewhere. From an early age, I just got caught with that bug, and I went to this special program in school, which was the worst thing you could call in a blue collar town. I grew up in this town called West Haven, this little beach community, and it was called the Gifted Program. And they shipped you off to another school. But even the teachers would like resent you, right? They would be like, "Gifted kids, get up," and the rest of the class is like, "Fuck you, gifted fucking kids." But we would go to this program, and for the first time ever in my education, the teacher would just say like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "Well, I love story." And she's like, "Just go to a room and write." And this was like third grade. So from third grade, I had like this regimen of writing like for 3-4 hours a week, and then presenting these stories to the other kids. So from that early age, I was like, wow, like if I could do this for a living, that would be a wonderful life. And filmmaking was an extension of that. My cousin was in film school. We would make these like little horror movies on the beach because I was a huge horror fan when I was little. And I don't know, you're probably about the same age as me. Like, remember those days when you go to the video store and you would just come home with like
Oh
a
yeah.
stack of tapes, you know, and I would watch them and break them down. How did they shoot this? How did they do that? It's like reverse engineering films from a really young age. Um,
What yeah, I mean, I relate to everything that you're saying. The deviation is I never thought that I could actually do it. It
Yeah,
always felt like Hollywood just felt like such a big thing that, and I have no entry point. Um, in my wildest fantasies, that's what I would choose to do if I just had an access to it, you know. But I also have kind of a background in writing, and I study film
nice.
from from kind of like a studious standpoint, but never thinking that I could entertain the possibility. So I'm just curious where that entry point was for you and where you saw that opening.
Well, all I said bad about liberal arts education, I have to say, I had a dean called Dean Deers, and he organized this trip for the 5 or 6 of us in this small little school called Susquehanna in Pennsylvania that were interested in film. And we went to LA to meet like real screenwriters. And Dean Deers had a Ray Liotta as a student. We didn't get to meet Ray, but we were supposed to. But when we got there, we were like, oh wow, these are just like dudes like making money, writing, working on movies, and they know our dean. So it felt like, okay, cool. Like I can see nice people here working in an industry making money. So it definitely upped my confidence to try to do it myself. And since I had learned to surf, I was like, well, I'm going to go live near a surf city, right? So where else could I go in the world but, Los Angeles? And, luckily that program hired me right away to teach film
Oh,
students because they were like expanding the Universal Studios. So my first job in LA was basically I went from that program to a teacher within that program and like making all these crazy short films on the Universal lot. And one of the funny things was Steven Spielberg's kid was like a teenager at the time and he was in my program. So here I
no
am like
way.
helping Spielberg's kid make these little movies, and like he's showing up to the screenings. They're just little short films that kids make. But right away I was like, okay, cool. And all my other peers were UCLA graduates and they were way ahead of me, like, because they had already studied 4 years of intensive. But they, the cool ones would kind of give me their advice about who to call to get jobs. I worked on a movie called Holes. Did you ever see that movie with Shia LaBeouf?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
actually I got on that job very, very early because in the New York Film Academy, I knew the summer program was ending and I didn't have a PhD in film, so they weren't going to keep me on for like the full year. So I saw they were like setting up this movie called Holes and I had read the book and I walk in and I'm like, oh guys, like, do you guys need anybody? And they're like, actually, we need someone to start tomorrow. And I work for the production designer. So I was the one, we dug all those holes in Ridgecrest. And of course, the Hollywood guys didn't want to go out to Ridgecrest and deal with these hardcore like workers. So I would go up to Ridgecrest and supervise all this drilling in a dry lake bed. And I was on that movie for like 7 months. So I really learned the ins and outs of a big production. And the director, Andy Davis, who directed like The Fugitive, he knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. So even though I was in the art department, which is mostly responsible for like the look of the film and the sets, he would, invite me to set sometimes where I would kind of make suggestions that nobody wanted to do. I remember him and Shia, like I came up with a shot of like Shia, like throwing the dirt and falling in the back. And like, I totally stopped production. I didn't know you shouldn't do that. But I thought it was like a funny idea, right? Because he's digging, but he's just like filling his own hole. And they
Yeah.
kind of went with it for a second, but then I just saw like the mechanics of this movie just shutting down around my enthusiasm and realized that I had better just, shut my mouth and learn instead of try to direct this movie
Right.
yeah. But it was such a learning experience, man. And yeah, it was a really good internship into the film industry. And it actually paid pretty well. I think I was on it for 7 months. Yeah.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking too with other people I've known who have worked in Hollywood that just kind of showing up, taking a job, whatever the job is, having that cash flow kind of from month to month to be able to sustain the lifestyle and the dream out there, but being on set and engaging and interacting is half of the battle. If you're still writing on the side and you still have your very pointed direction of where you want to go, as long as you're there being a part of the moving pieces, it seems like opportunities present themselves.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're a hard worker and you're willing to learn, I think very quickly a lot of people don't end up actually directing or writing because they find they're a talented editor or they find they're talented. Like I could have gone the art department route because I could have gone on a swing gang and those guys are union and they get paid a ton of money, but I didn't want to be driving in trucks and like setting up glasses on sets. I knew I wanted to direct. So after that, I made a point that, okay, that was my learning experience. I'm going to really pursue my own path. And I had a couple of scripts that like almost got sold, you know, like these close calls. I wrote a movie about these mountain men, a guy named Jim Bridger. It actually, the movie The Revenant, did you ever see that movie?
Of course.
Yeah, so it was that exact trapping mission, and I wrote it about 10 years earlier, but told from the perspective of the kid, Jim Bridger. That's the one that leaves the Leonardo DiCaprio character. So it was like this coming of age story of this kid who abandoned one of his mates on this journey, and we almost got it made, and it would have been like $100 million movie, and it didn't get made. But there was like such a great feeling when I saw The Revenant get made, because I was sitting there going around Hollywood pitching this basically the same story, but told from a much different perspective with a great director. It would have been a whole different movie. But it was really like, I remember calling the manager and saying, hey, see, it did get made. Like somebody made the story somehow, you know?
Into an incredible film. Like it validated
so beautiful. Because that was a really key part of American history, you know, the free trapping. I love American history, and I think there's so many great stories in that. So from that, I said, what can I do like on a Blair Witch kind of budget, you know, that's still tied to American history? And I found the Donner Party story when I was researching that. And there's a group called the Forlorn Hope that left the main party. So it was basically just a small amount of people in the snow. And I thought, wow, I can do this on a budget. And I got that movie made, and it was one of the early streamers on Netflix, and it sold to Showtime. I don't love the movie because I didn't have final cut. So even if you agree with some of the choices, artistic choices, because I saw the movie differently, it was a bit of a frustrating experience. But, you know, nice to be in my 20s actually and get a feature film, produced and distributed. I think.
Was it just the final cut where you lost creative control?
Yeah, it was weird. It was kind of a hustle, man. You know, there was an era of Hollywood, which I think is kind of dying now, which is great, where the producer would just kind of do what they can to get everybody to work cheap and hard, and then they would just take your movie and do whatever they wanted with it, which my producer assured me that was not the case, because I had worked a lot for Harvey Weinstein in a whole different business. And I said, hey, I don't want this. This is my movie. Like, you're barely paying me anything. At least I have to have creative control. But, you know, it didn't end up happening. He had this idea that we had to like turn it into like more of a horror movie than it needed to be. And the distributor who bought it actually said they only bought it because it was with Crispin Glover, and we had to change the name to The Donner Party, even though it's about a small group of it was called The Forlorn or the Forlorn Hope. So all the stuff he did it just caused a rift between me and the actors, because the actors came on for me, not for him. Yeah. They didn't like the choice. He was just killing characters someone needs to die here, you know, like without any real respect to what really happened. And it really hurt me because I wanted to tell the story with reverence to what really happened, you know, and historians would come out and say, these guys just trashed the story. Did they even research? And I said, yeah, man, like, should have read the first script. Like, we had Gary Oldman who wanted to do it, a guy named Barry Pepper who I loved in
I know
Saving Private Ryan. And
totally.
We had, like, when you have a good script and you can get those levels actors, our producer didn't even realize that that's really rare, you know, because they're willing to do the film at a very low cost because they really believe in the page, you know. And now that I know I could have had more leverage to get final cut because of that. But he just made me feel like I'm very lucky to have the money and just go shoot the movie and everything will be great, was what he said.
So when you're saying that era is kind of dying in Hollywood, is that to say that they're embracing the independent filmmaker a little bit more and letting that vision kind of see its full expression?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the distributors are actually paying less up front for films, which is kind of nice, but they're partnering. So on this film, we're still like a majority owner of our film, even though we're using a distributor. And I like that relationship a lot, because it's not like, hey, we own you. We're with you. We're helping you to get the film to the world, but we're partnering in the success or failure of the movie with you. The tricky thing is to find honest distributors, but I have an attorney that's been in the business for 30 years, so I trust him because he can see the returns on all his other clients' films.
So in the past, there were fewer distribution channels. So they figured if they could pay you a small amount up front and own the film, they knew how to land it in the distribution channel and take all that profit basically.
Exactly. And
and
they
now
would dangle like just enough money that it was like, hey, it's like you made 100,000 or something, but then people didn't realize that they're making triple, quadruple, my lawyer said.
Yeah.
So when you're a partner, it's great because your ceiling, there's no ceiling. Like our movie came out now and we're just starting to see the revenue, but it's going to be a 7-year process. People are going to find it on streaming platforms and we're going to feel really like it's going to come out in Japan and France, and we're going to be part of all that. So it's really exciting. My producer, the one that I'm talking shit about, actually sold it to one of those guys that just gave it like $250,000 up front, but they had told him, hey, like this is just the beginning. You're going to get millions after. He never saw one other report besides that $250,000, which was still, I think, profitable for what we shot it for. But it was a very frustrating experience for him because I think that distributor made a ton. Like not many indies play on Showtime for 2 years, and it kept streaming from Netflix to Amazon and I still find it out there. I think it has a bunch of YouTube views now. I check it out for the actors, but it's like painful to watch it. It's like, man, like,
sure.
Oh, yeah.
As it relates to writing, those examples that you gave were based on real stories, nonfiction, and books even. So, and the film that you just made seems much more, well, it's fictional, but it seems like it might be based somewhat autobiographically, or themes are autobiographic. Were you always writing both kind of genres, or was that a transition for you?
Fiction is my number one, but I love when the fiction is rooted in reality, like a real drama, making real life, but finding a dramatic thread to tell the story properly, this latest, even though it's fiction and my wife and I are in it, like we're not like those characters at all. Like I would have gone to the island in a second. Like I'm super nice to my wife, but people, when they meet me, they're like a little bit standoffish. They think I'm a real dick. And it was just important for that movie that character start off really, really in that place. But even in this film, you're looking at like Robinson Crusoe, and you're playing with these ideas of trapped on an island and how history has played into that. So I did a lot of research on the Stranded on the Island film, and really wanted it to be more about the emotional survival, right? Like we could have gone to Castaway and played with this idea more about how I get fish, but I wanted it to be about finding purity, Yeah.
And first of all, I loved the film.
Oh, really? Good. Because not everybody does. So I was nervous.
No, I really did. And
thank you.
Yeah. And I thought it was just so conceptually well conceived on so many different levels. And even the way that the title plays, I thought it meant something else at the first third of the film. And I thought it meant something different at the second third. And the final third, it meant something entirely different. Yeah. It was really smart, poignant, charming, everything.
Nice. I'm glad you got that. We wanted it to be very open to interpretation. We know what we're trying to say, but we're okay with people finding different, like Kubrick is one of my favorite filmmakers, and I can rewatch like his films like 2001 and think about something different each time. So that's what we're kind of shooting for, is that it's open to interpretation, but yeah, that's great that you got it. We're finding in the early reviews like very polarized. Like
really?
Some people are saying, we get emails saying, hey, this is like the best movie I've seen in the year, and some real aggressive hate as well.
Well, I'm not sure I understand where the hate would come from. I could see if you were scrolling your phone and half watching the film, that a lot of the, I don't know, the best parts of it would be lost on you. If you are watching it and cluing into those themes, and the interactions, it's very relatable. The interaction with with Ed Harris's character with your father is very relatable. Him kind of overseeing and trying to overlord what's going on in their personal dynamic is relatable. the wife wanting something to do on her own and conflicting, and all of it's
Sure.
very relatable.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. Well, we have like this negative stalker that anytime there's like a mention of our film, he goes up and writes like all the things that are bad about the film. And
Is he a film critic?
I don't know. I think I think he's a little crazy because I tried to interact with him in a funny way, saying, "Hey, man, like your points are valid, but why don't you try to let everybody else enjoy the film?" But he said like the ending was totally hedonistic, which I don't agree. Maybe it's a religious thing. But I feel like sex and love and enjoying plants is not hedonistic at all. It's a good way to find purity. But
Yeah,
you know,
that's a strange criticism. I think you could just write that guy off, to be honest.
Yeah, totally. But you know, the negative ones always sting because this is not just some horror movie I made for fun. Like we put a lot into it. So we actually really like reading the reviews and saying, "Oh wow, they processed it that way." One really good reviewer gave it like a mixed review, and he said they just shouldn't be together. And we were like, no way. Like he was super young, and we were like, I don't think he ever experienced like real chemical attraction. That's what we were going for. It's like maybe they're not the nicest guy, but there's I feel like a very strong chemical pull between the two that I hope is undeniable. But
it's undeniable. And then what was relatable was if you're in a confined space, a sailboat with that person for an extended period of time, you're going to get cabin fever and hate that person no matter how much. And so then that chemical pull comes back into play with a little bit of separation. And then each person's kind of playing their part to like, no, but I don't want you. So that makes you want the person more. Like all of that was spot on for sure.
Awesome, man. Yeah, it's nice. And for an indie film like ours, we just need a certain percentage to love it, you know, and that's what we shoot for. Because we released it in a way that it went to theaters actually, which is rare for a film like that. So when you were in like say Omaha and you saw this come on VOD, you thought this was like with Top Gun, you know, it came as like in theaters. So we took a big risk doing that. We weren't presenting it as like this festival darling. We were presenting this is a big movie in theaters, and it'll be interesting to see how the numbers are on that. But we like that idea of just kind of putting it out there with all the other films, all the Marvel movies, and seeing how it kind of settled in and attracted an audience.
So let's talk a little bit about the process of the journey, I guess, of making the film.
Sure.
Apparently it was a 7-year process. What was the concept for the script from the get-go?
Well, it's really funny, man, because with the Donner Party, I realized like with, you know, the distributors kind of wanted horror and thriller. Like you can just kind of package those things really easily. And I met the love of my life, who's my co-director in this, Dominique Braun. And she had studied acting in New York, and she was just like, we would always like watch movies and like get frustrated with the same cliches and love the same art films, and even the big Hollywood movies. We would want them. We would really agree artistically on what we like. So we wanted to make a movie, and I so wanted to share. Her dream was to like go to an island. So our first stop was in Kauai, and we were going to make a horror movie here about the chickens. You know how the chickens are all around. It was called Balk with an exclamation mark. And my idea was like, I wanted to kind of get away from Hollywood and do something in the surf world. So I got Sonny Garcia to play this hardcore local, and we were going to use some other pro surfers and have it be like surf film. And it was about, it was right after Fukushima, and it was about like this crate came to shore right in Kauai, and the chickens start eating the crate, and they just go crazy. So these tourists get caught, but for whatever reason the money wasn't coming, even though it would have been a slam dunk. It was like this silly fun horror surf movie, and the budget wasn't high, and we were getting so frustrated by the financial process that we said, hey, like let's just make a movie where we're the actors, so we don't have to like schedule in a week for everybody, and if we screw up, like the movie's going to be bad. Let's just take a project that doesn't have a deadline. And that's when we started this. And it was important to me that we improvise a lot and then draw the script from that. So I saw when we improvise, like even though we're a very loving couple, like when we would kind of like get into that tension, it felt like real fireworks were coming. So then I started to think, where does my own anger come from? You know, and we all have family issues and people put things in our mind. And it was something we both were wanting to explore at the time. So it was, I guess, not to overuse the words organic, but in the way of finding a story, it was organic between her and I and what we wanted to do in a film, and just take our time with it. And we actually shot all that island stuff before we got Ed Harris into it. So we had this movie, It was just two of us. Like, imagine that beginning, but without any cutting away, just all there. And it was super intense. But it seemed like a framework, and you needed something deeper. And I had worked a job at the Academy Awards, and I really got along with Ed Harris the year he was nominated for Pollock, about Jackson Pollock, the painter. So I had his contact info, and I said, well, what would you think about trying to get Ed Harris to play my dad? And Tony's like, oh my God, The Abyss is my favorite movie. And we brought it to him. We didn't hear back for 7 months. And at 7 months, he said, let's have breakfast. And we pitched it to him. And he's like, I'm in, guys. You got to wait a year. I'm doing this little Western sci-fi show for HBO, which turned out to be the first season of Westworld. And
well, I mean, when he told you that it's a Western sci-fi show, you probably scoffed. You're like, perfect. I'll see you in a year, and then you could be with me full time.
Yeah.
Not having any idea. That idea sounds insane, but it's so good, you know.
Well, it's actually based on a film. Once I learned the title, I went and watched the old film, and it's pretty cool.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, with Yul Brynner. It's there's like from the 70s. It must be a book as well. But yeah, he was stoked because he goes from this like huge HBO show where it's like waiting in a trailer all day to like just, you know, work and gritty. He's like a gritty, creative guy. So even though we weren't obviously paying HBO rates, like I thought he got a pretty good experience out of it. He gets to unleash and be creative, and he's a, you know, fabulous actor. Those are the experiences he lives for, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, honestly, over the years, I've always loved his choice of projects.
Yeah.
Whether it's huge or he does a lot of smaller stuff too, but he's like super reliable in terms of if he's in it, I always love the film.
I agree. And I think you would think like anybody who's like a millionaire actor would only do cool stuff, you know? But there's like some actors that you just see the shit they do and you're like, dude, like, why are you doing that? I think when you have that kind of power to choose your projects, they should be of a different thing. If you're a struggling actor or you're not on the giant level, you just kind of have to take what's offered to you. But have you gotten feedback from him about the final project as it lives now? Does he like it? Yeah, man, it was so cool because we premiered in the Lemley Theater in Santa Monica, which is an art house theater that I've been going to since I first moved to LA. Like I would come home from surfing Malibu and just pull off and see whatever movie was playing at 12. I remember seeing Dancer in the Dark there and like crying my freaking eyes out at how brilliant that movie was. And staying for a second showing because I liked it so much. So to premiere there, Ed luckily had just come off a project. He lives in Malibu. He drove down. He just sat like between Domi and I. And at the end of the movie, he's like, "Hey guys, like I'm so glad I did this. It came out really beautiful." And
good.
He was really proud of it. Maybe we'll
amazing.
Work with it.
So in terms of the timeline, so you shot the stuff with Dominique and yourself on the boat, presented that to Ed, got him to sign on, and then you said it took him a year to actually be able to film?
Yeah, so we would go and I would read through the scenes and we would improvise. We wanted him to be kind of funny, like a dick, yeah, but like a little bit lovable, you know? So we came up with ways that he could kind of insult me in a way. Like I had a babysitter when I was a kid, and her husband was a Marine, and it just he was a hardcore dude. He loved me a lot, but he was really hard, and I kind of based it on that guy. And Ed brought a lot to the table, and and when we got him, it was so fun because I don't train as an actor, and here I am going head to head with one of the best actors ever, you know?
Yeah.
So he could kind of direct me, and with emotionally, you know, like, so it was amazing.
Fascinating. So where does the timeline go from there then? You've got Ed, you filmed that stuff.
Yeah,
What's next?
we cut it together. We got a really good editor and put it together, and it felt like so machista, like so male energy, and it's like Domi needed to breathe. So we then created her sister character, and Martina Guzman, who plays her sister, who is a lesbian who owns a ranch in Argentina, was to counteract the hardness of Ed and my brother. Yeah. And she's actually pretty well known. She's on a show on Apple now called Echo 3, I think it is, which is I really recommend. And she's just a fabulous actress. She's one of the best actresses of Argentina. So we had to wait for her, but we thought it was worth it. Again, we had no producers breathing down our necks. You know, we had the time, and we just wanted the movie to come out well. And then when we cut it with her, we were like, okay, cool. Like now we can go from the male energy to the female. Been reading a lot of books about male and female, and we're really like, even though we're realizing everybody's on a spectrum, like males are so testosterone driven, like that's just what we have, you know, and females with estrogen, and they're much different chemicals, you know. So I really wanted to explore that idea of like how we relate to that. And I just love how soft the sister talk compared to like how the males talk, you know. It's
I thought she was phenomenal as an actress, and I was not familiar with her.
Yeah.
I loved her. And speaking of energy, that first embrace that they give one another when they reconnect, that hug, I was just like, I don't hug my family like that, but I want to. Like, and then I was like, maybe it's just a South America kind of thing, like to be more effusive and to show your emotions more, you know?
It was really the touch it needed. And it took really COVID for us to be there with the film. And now we had 3 different shoots to put together to really find the story. And
that's fascinating to build it that way.
Yeah, once we did, we took it to my lawyer and we said, like, first of all, who's actually paying filmmakers? And this company, Brainstorm, had put out a movie, a skate film. I think it's called North Hollywood, but it had done really well for them. It's worth checking out. And they actually killed it on VOD because everybody was at home stuck. And here's this like skateboard movie with Vince Vaughn. And my lawyer repped those guys, and he said, yeah, this company's on the up and up, and they like your movie. Like, if you want to even just skip that whole go to festivals and compete, which I had done with Donner Party, and I hate that. It's like every film is its own magic energy. Like, why are we competing? You know, it kind of extends to surfing too. I like competition, you know, but I like competition more when it's like a game that everybody's playing that they understand, not when it's like super subjective, you know. Like, I like the surfing of Jordy Smith. I feel like he's so smooth and he doesn't ever look sketched out or like he's trying too hard. And so for me, it's like, why doesn't he get the same scores, you know? And I feel the same about film, because you go to a festival and everybody's saying my film's better than yours, this one's deserving. Like, if you put a lot of love and it's a good story, they're all perfect, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's
well,
threw a lot out there, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to the timeline in the film, but let's use this to segue to your work experience doing the screenings. What is that called?
Test screen. Yeah. Have you ever been to one?
Believe it or not, I have. Jason Reitman's film Labor Day.
Oh yeah, I remember that film.
You remember that film? Yeah. I don't even know how I got invited or why I would have gone at the time.
Probably just a dude with a sheet or something.
It wasn't that, because I heard you talking about that, doing that, and I'm like, no, it wasn't a random. Somebody for some reason reached out who I knew and coaxed me into going. And I went and sat through the film, and then
filled out the little card.
Yeah, Jason Reitman was there, and he got up and talked, and like I filled out the card. I gave I realized some people just wrote on the card real quickly and passed it in. And I was like trying to give real meaningful feedback. Right. And when the film ultimately came out in theaters, you know, a year later or whatever it was a different version of the film that I saw. So they absolutely used feedback from those screeners. But talk a little bit about your experience doing those test screeners and what you learned from it.
Yeah, that was interesting because I had that experience on Holes where I learned a lot about production. I was on a major motion picture, but I didn't have any time to write. I was working like 70, 80 hours a week. That's another thing that's changing about Hollywood is they're not working, when I was a production assistant in the art department, not working people with the same hours. But I really missed writing in my own projects. Like there was no way I could be in production and write and direct. Like I just would have no time. I would probably have a lot more money, but I wouldn't have any time. So I said, like, what kind of job can I do in the film industry that I can make my own hours? And in LA, there's these guys that recruit for free screenings. It's basically a sales job. You just go up and you say, hey, I'm with Miramax or I'm with, Sony, and we're testing the new Harry Potter. Would you like to come? And you get paid per numbers, and I could make my own hours. And I was really good at it. I would get, like, they would say very specific demographics, like, hey, like we're light on 18-year-olds, like go find 18-year-olds. So you would just be like, okay, like where am I going to find 18-year-olds? Let's go to Santa Monica Beach. I'll have a surf and then I'll walk down the beach and see who's going to be in town and just talk to people, have a beer. And I did it really laid back, and they started to send me to different cities to do it, which was like, only for the top people in the company. And you would get like this nice hotel room, and every week you would get a different movie. And I worked on like The Departed was one of my favorite ones with, Martin Scorsese, and it was amazing because Goodfellas is like one of my top 10 films of all time, and here I am like giving him audience feedback. You have to be very careful never to give your feedback because they're not paying for that, but they're kind of paying for like a general feeling of the audience. Like sometimes good intentioned filmmakers, like their ending just doesn't connect. Like people won't know, oh, that flower represented this, so they'll have to go in and say, well, like, it's not such a bad thing. We just have to figure out a way to make what I'm intending. That's how it worked the best, Sometimes it worked in ways that the producers wanted to completely change the movie. So they would just use bad scores to manipulate filmmakers. And that was frustrating. But yeah, it was in its purest form. It was about making a big film better and more relatable to an audience and more enjoyable. So yeah, I did that for about 4 years before I got the Donner Party film made, and then I retired. I actually started playing poker along the way, and ended up making so much at that and not having to put in many hours that it became hard to go to this job where you had to eat a lot of shit because you're working for these like top Hollywood guys. When I was like, I can make way more money at the poker tables than dealing with like frustrated studio heads, because sometimes you would test the movie and you would get a great audience, but they would like look for ways that you screwed up because their movie tested badly.
Right.
I learned so much on this movie called Dreamgirls. You know this movie, Dreamgirls?
Yeah. I never saw it, but I know exactly. It's Jamie Foxx and Beyonce.
Yeah,
right?
it's Eddie Murphy, I think, is the main character, but it's a Black musical turned into a film. And they wanted a very white young audience to see it. They didn't want just like people who like musicals and stuff, right? So they sent me and this guy who was the best recruiter in the company. He was kind of like my mentor and my travel partner, to Dallas to recruit this all Black movie. I'm from the East Coast, so I don't know much about racial politics. They wanted us to go to like white colleges, like get this kind of like Caucasian audience to see this film. And we just couldn't do it. People would refuse to go to the movie. So they all fly into Dallas, Katzenberg's there, everybody. In the front row, it looks like the Village People, it's like a musical loving. And they're like, where are all these like corn-fed Texas guys? And I was saying like, hey man, I tried so hard. Like we never worked this hard on a movie. We put in 10 hours a day. Like maybe your movie is just not connecting to that. And I nearly got fired for what they perceived was that we just like ignored the assignment.
Right.
And I thought like, oh man, like this sucks. Like the hardest I've ever worked on the movie, put in the most time, and here I am like getting in trouble for it,
Yeah.
And so I went to poker full time, and then I made the Donner Party.
Right.
That Dreamgirls was frustrating because I thought it was a really good movie. And I think a lot of the rejection was racially motivated. Like we don't want to see an all Black cast. And I had never experienced that before because I had no experience with the South. Like, I feel like if we had recruited that in New York City, we would have gotten the demographic they wanted. But there was like this real tension of like, no, and I didn't understand it at first. And then when I saw the screening, I realized the racial divide is a real thing in our country, even though if I hadn't experienced it before.
Yeah. The film was successful though, wasn't it? Despite that?
Yeah, I think it did really well. I think Eddie Murphy, I don't think he won the Oscar, but he was like one of the favorites to the Oscar. And
yeah,
it was just an eye-opening experience for me and Hollywood Blaine, like Blaine, the little guy who's out there in the hot sun 10 hours a day, like working so hard for your movie.
Totally.
And if I didn't have that poker outlet, I probably would have kept on for who knows, but I was able just to kind of step away and say, hey guys, like, this is not for me. I think there's a tradition in Hollywood of really hazing the little guy, like your assistant. There's even movies about abuse of assistants, a whole genre of film.
Swimming with Sharks.
Yeah, that's the best one, totally, with Kevin Spacey.
So did the poker playing fund the film?
Yeah. Mostly everything came from poker. My mom passed away, unfortunately, and her last thing was to give us a donation to finish the post-production. So we have her and Domi's dad listed in the producing credits. So it was nice to have their contribution. Our movie was actually the last movie that they both saw. So they were able to see it with us holding hands, and, even before we cut it, so they could kind of say, hey, like, mold it a little bit, but they were both really impressed with the film.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
The timeline seems super extended, but it sounds like maybe it's all kind of meant to be.
Yeah, I think for a project like this, when you're really putting your heart and soul, you're writing it, you're acting in it, we needed this time. We now want to do like a more compact thriller, where we really structure the shots, and the whole goal is like to entertain an audience, not to have people interpret the film. I'm ready to do something with more commercial ambitions, I think.
How did you and your wife meet?
This is a crazy story, man. If you have time to get into it, it's a tangent, but
do it.
It's actually related to surfing too. I don't know if you know much about Hollywood surfers, but I feel like one of the best actors who surfs is a guy named Andrew Keegan. And I lived near him in Venice. He's a good friend.
He was like a pro level surfer in
he's sick.
early 2000s.
First time we surfed, we went out at Venice. I just got like a stand-up barrel, like right off the Venice pier. I couldn't believe it. I was just like, oh my God, like you're really the real deal. Because a lot of actors say they can surf, and then you get out there with them and like, but yeah, he's the real deal. And he used to throw these giant block parties in Venice, right near where I live. And I went one year. I wasn't drinking this year, so I was really lucid. And I just saw this girl, and she was with this like annoying drunk guy that was like bothering her, but it was her date, obviously. And I kind of went up and I said, oh yeah, you're really beautiful. I was like, who's this guy? Like, and she was like, oh, this guy's an idiot. And anyway, she ended up bailing, but we didn't exchange any information, but we kind of danced a little. It was just a really nice connection. And maybe like 3 days later, Andrew's girlfriend actually forced him to call me. He said, I think there's notes for you in the neighborhood, dude. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, like Post-it notes. It's like, I meet this TJ at this party. He's bald, she said, because she didn't know how to say like short hair. Like, he's around 28, 30. I don't know who he is, but if there's any way you guys in this Venice area know him, please tell him that I really liked him. And I hope that he could call me. And I did. And we've been together 12 years ever since.
That is so whimsical.
Isn't that crazy, man? Like,
if you wrote that into a film, I'd be like, that's so stupid.
Dude, we did write it. We put it in the movie, and it felt like it just went to a Hallmark movie. Like, it felt like
exactly.
Yeah. We had her telling her sister the story, and it was like, no way. But like you would have to make it that tone of movie, like a real romantic, sweet film. But I just thought, wow, like what guts, I had never met anybody that would even think of doing that? And for us to really connect. And a crazy thing about life is I was going to Alaska to write a script on a bear hunt gone wrong. These producers wanted to do this film, and I had never got made, but they funded me to go to Kodiak, Alaska, like right where the like hardcore grizzly bears are. And I said, I have 2 nights, like, let's go out. I don't know how long I'm going to be in Alaska. We just hit it off. It was amazing 2 dates. I'm gone in Alaska. She lives in New York City. So I'm like, I'm never going to see this woman again. I come back. I've been waiting on an apartment in Venice Beach to open up. I come back and she had no idea of where I was going to live here. She had rented a room literally across the street.
Oh my gosh.
So I come back and she's just part of my life. Like, it was like, what is the universe doing? Like, there's something strange going on here. Like, I'm a big science guy, but it's like, what are the odds? And
that's remarkable.
Absolutely crazy, man.
The Post-it note situation, Craigslist used to, I don't know, maybe they still have.
Yeah, I remember that.
Missed connections.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
it's a real life misconnections.
And this is so sweet. I still have one of the notes. I made Andrew keep it for me. And I always joke with Andrew that I have to like give him profit shares on this film. He came to the premiere because he kind of owe it all to him for just being a good community leader and throwing these giant parties.
Well, I mean, the balls or bravado it takes for you at a party to see somebody who you think is beautiful, who you also think is on a date with somebody, to walk up and say to that person, you're beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a ballsy move. And so to have her reciprocate in such a grand fashion has to be the most validating thing in the world.
Yeah, it was really nice. I mean, I don't know if you know much about the LA scene, but I dated a lot of actresses, and there's just such a hunger for success that when you're dealing with people in the industry, it's very hard to find trust and find a person that is really there for you and not just maybe trying to meet someone that you're working for to make, like, it's such a everybody's connections. I need connections, you know? And it's
transient. It's hard to find somebody who's sincerity, I guess, is what it is.
Yeah, I got extremely lucky, man. And trust me, before it was all 6 month, 3 month, like I never had anything like it. And now it's 12 years and it feels shorter than those short relationships I was in.
Well, obviously you're sharing writing credit and directing credit on this film.
Yeah.
What is that relationship look like moving forward? Do you always continue to share?
I think she's more inclined to be the lead actress. We went through this process of like putting our eggs on ice, you know, so we can have kids when we're 60 or something. And we did it in Argentina because they're a little bit ahead in some medical ways. And we had like this doctor that was just like in love with her genetics and was so twisted. So I came up with a story about a company that's like manipulating women to get these kind of like futuristic perfect babies, but they're not taking it's called womb. And I see her as like the lead in this because I wrote it for her, and me more as the director, and she can produce it. And you know, these kind of 7-year projects where you're both writing and directing together are not loose undertakings, you know. So for the next one, I'd love for her to be the main actor, and maybe I don't act. Maybe we get like a known Hollywood guy to play the husband. I would kind of like that. I'm not as comfortable with acting as she is. She really enjoys it, and it stresses me out.
Well, and I apologize for not doing my research on her work history, but
no problem.
Is she taking projects, acting projects as well?
Well, we've been just dealing with her dad, you know, who just passed away. So we just really haven't had time for her to set up the whole audition process. And nobody knew who she was anyway. But now she's like, God, she just maxed out on Facebook like the day the movie opened, and a lot of people saying, oh my God, I'm in love with you. And like, I really think she kind of shines. Ed said the same thing, but she's not a careerist, you know, like a lot of the people in Hollywood that really make it, they're just burning to like be a star, you know. She wants to do good projects, and if it's just between her and I think that's okay for her. But certainly if Ridley Scott or someone wanted her to do a project, we would take it in a second, you know.
Yeah, of
But
course.
she's really content, just like, you know, going to the beach, you know, enjoying life. You know, that's her main thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Sounds healthy.
Yeah, definitely. Hollywood can be a poison, man. And I really feel like surfing saved me during those 20 years, because no
Yeah.
matter how bad things get, I could just get to Venice before the sun went down, or, you know, get out to Malibu on the weekends and get like a soul cleanse, you know?
Couple of surf specific questions about the film, just things that I noticed.
Sure.
Wayo Weiler surfboard.
Yeah, man. That's cool. No?
That's a deep pull, dude. He's
Yeah.
Peruvian, right?
Peruvian shaper. Yeah. Yeah.
So why was that board your choice?
I needed a board. We were doing, we knew when we got to Santiago, we needed to get everything there. And back then there weren't that many board choices. Ramon Navarro and his partner had a shop. So we went into that shop, and Ramon had surfed this island and not many people had. And I needed a board that had a lot of concave, that I knew that I could at least make a drop. You know, I didn't know what I would find as far as surf went, just based on a few pictures. And he does boards that like really handle hollow waves well. So when I saw that on the rack, I was like, okay, cool. Like I could drop in on something here, and a non-surf audience isn't going to think anything different, you know? So yeah. I purchased that board. I brought that board and my normal short board, and we only got one day of surf. So I'm really glad I had that longer board, because I had no frame of reference to that break. I just went out, and there was thousands of sea lions all around me, and it took about 4 hours to get those two waves. But I wanted a board that I was going to stick the drop, you know.
Yeah.
And I like it was like almost like one of those old pipeline boards, you know, like it had a lot of bend in it. It wouldn't be like my normal short board to ride for fun and speed. But
I thought maybe you just knew Wayo and you were hooking him up with a little free logo placement advertising.
All function for sure. Cool. It was like the board that I thought like, okay, cool. Like I can't blow it on this board. I didn't want to get there with like a normal short board and just fall the whole time, because we had literally one day to shoot the surf scene. That island is crazy because they're like a fishing village, but when the waves are big, nobody goes to the other side of the island. Like they're these little wooden skiffs, and it would take you like an hour when it's calm to get there, and it'll take you 2 or 3 hours to get there and they risk losing their boat. And we got this like young greenhorn to agree finally, after everybody turned us down, to take us. We had to say, hey, like we put our whole lives in this film and we need these scenes. And he took us and he tied us up to where that break is, to the little dock. And we're like getting stuff off, and it's all good. And all of a sudden he turns white, a set's coming, and he just like takes a hatchet from his boat and hatchets the rope and just kicks off. And we just got the camera off and we're just stuck on this side of the island until the swell goes down, which turned out to be 2 or 3 days. And we just camped out there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there was I forget what company it was, a big company. There's a CEO. They also have the airport on this side. It was 2 weeks longer because no boats were taken to the other side of the island. And we realized in that moment, like this guy could have lost his boat. Like we would have done all we could to reimburse him. But, you know, thank you to that guy. Like we wouldn't have had that surf scene. And it was so important to me because we set up these little clues about, hey, like you're not surfing, the father says. And for me, like when I surf, everything falls into place. And I thought for a surfer, when they see the movie, maybe they can see like once he surfs, like he's a much more chill kind of dude. Yeah.
That's exactly what was conveyed in the film. It was like, he was tense, he was drinking too much, all that kind of stuff. And then, he got the refresh and it set him straight, and he goes back to make things right.
Yeah. And the way I look at her by the fire right after the surf scene, it's like, you can see like this kind of contentment. And it's also dealing with the issues of the father, but the surfing was like the activity that you couldn't have until you sealed up those things. So it's an intense island, man. We took a boat, which was maybe something we would never do again. We talked this guy into renting us our boat, renting his boat to us, and the captain said, like, I'm going to need you guys to work on the boat. It's like a 3-day journey, and our editor just got violently sick, and about 2 days in, he started coughing up blood, and we would have turned back if we only had 1 day to go, and just taking a bunch of people and putting them, especially in the Humboldt Current, out to sea, like we were we were crazy to do it. But
What was he sick? Like, what was he sick from?
He had seasickness so bad that he couldn't hold anything down, and he was like regurgitating so much that I think he just like upset something inside himself that broke, so the blood was now coming out. And our captain, who was just like this stout Chilean guy, was like laughing at us because like it was like maybe waist head high. It was still just boom, 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 but he's used to like much, much bigger seas, so he's like, this is nothing, guys.
Yeah.
But when the blood started coming, he started to get very concerned. And it's funny, as soon as we hit land, like all the life came back. He ran to the satellite phone. He calls his girlfriend. He's a Argentine editor. He's like, baby, I'm so sorry for everything I've ever done. I'm going to be a better man. My whole life flashed before my eyes. And from that moment on, like we didn't have any problems with the sea because we were like in the vicinity of the island, and we felt like pros.
Well, what a team building experience too. You feel like you've gone through something harrowing together.
Yeah, and we had to charter a plane to take them home. Obviously, no one was going to step foot on a boat going back again. But yeah, it was
so the film. I mean, in the film, is that supposed to be Easter Island? Isn't that what was said?
Well, I say we're heading to Easter Island, and this is an island that would have been along the way. It's not literally Robinson Crusoe, but it's an island that you would have just encountered on your way to Easter Island, was kind of how I thought of it in my head.
Got it.
There's tons of these crazy little islands out there.
Yeah.
But I know in real life, I would have just told her, yeah, let's go explore the island, like that's like, but without that, you don't have the movie. And yeah,
of course. Yeah. No, it totally worked. The other surf specific question I was going to ask you is, why aren't there fins on that board when you're paddling it to shore?
Well, because I had it stored away, right? I mean, I don't travel with my fins on my boards. I just pull it out of the case and I want to get to her right away. I'm not going for a surf. I'm using it only for transportation. So if I put fins in it, it would be like, I'm so desperate to see her. It's like, it could have been a float,
Got it. Yeah. So it was intentional.
Yeah, it was just like, how would I have packed this board? And in this situation, I would pull it out and there would be no fins on it, because whenever I pack my boards, I don't have fins on them. I just wanted it to be more rushed, than anything.
Exactly.
We actually almost had, you remember that company that like Jamie O'Brien was like a rep for, where the board would like have a little motor on it? I think they went out of business, but they were all surfing them in Oahu one season. And that company almost gave us one, because we thought it was going to be so funny for me to like have this like slow motoring thing instead of paddling. But at the last minute, they said like Jamie or someone on the North Shore broke too many of their boards. So they were like these really expensive boards.
You're right. I do remember. It was, I think they were just called jet board or something like that.
But I thought it would be so funny just to see me like cruising around, like
that's
not even
hilarious.
paddling, but they were way too expensive for us to even think about buying one on our own. And then when we didn't have that, I just said like, what would I do if I had my board back here? I would just pull it out and go to shore rather than take a dinghy, because it's so much easier to just put on your wetsuit and paddle.
Yeah, that's exactly why I asked too, because there's so many elements like that in films where I'm like, is it intentional, or did they just not know that you're supposed to have fins in the board or whatever? And I know you would know to have fins in your board, but you just wonder, or maybe there's an element of the production, maybe somebody in production forgot to pack the fins or something stupid like that, So I'm glad to hear that it's an intentional. That's exactly what
we actually had a conversation about it. We're like, this board would not have fins because it's packed on a boat. Like it would be all dinged up.
It was in a board bag.
Yeah, exactly. And those are the touches that I think if you use like a director who doesn't surf, they won't know any of those little details, I feel like Hollywood gets wrong surfing so many times, and sometimes it's super funny and the story still works, like Point Break. Like I can enjoy that film, but it's like surfers are not behind that film. It's quite obvious,
Yeah, completely.
It's like that. It's like a fantasy version of surfing.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want that for this film. Obviously, it's not a surf film per se, but I wanted the surfing to connect with people who really enjoy the activity.
Absolutely. For listeners who are interested in watching the film, what's the best way to help support the film?
Well, our distributor said right now the best way is to get that Prime AI kicking in, because that can last 20, 30 years. So if you see it on Amazon Prime, I think it's like $3.99. You just drop a comment like worth watching, or give it a nice rating. That will help the longevity of the film. I'm sure it will be streaming somewhere in the next few months. If you don't have the $3.99, you'll be able to see it. I don't know what company, but someone will. But that would be the most helpful. And then the same on iTunes, you can see it there.
But aside from just paying the $3.99, rating and reviewing is key too.
Yeah, it really helps their algorithm kick in. Everything's based on algorithms now. So the more ratings they see, they can match it up to other films, and then it just starts popping on people's Amazon screen. And that's a big, big deal for us.
Good.
Yeah.
And then what are you starting to map out the next project? I'm sure you're writing right now.
Yeah, that Project Womb, I have a script. It still needs some work. I've been doing a lot of medical research because I want it to be like 20 years in the future of what we're going to be able to do with babies, like set in a not so distant future, but enough futuristic tech that it can be really realistic of like what's going on with this super baby inside of her that gives her these powers and crazy stuff happens. And I have a book that I've been working on for years, man. It's my ode to surfing. I actually listened to some of your podcasts for research, like with Bill Hamilton. It's about a father in 1969 that rather than see his kid drafted for Vietnam, he takes them on a worldwide sail, and they end up stranded with a primal culture. And it's about just the nature of war, and they're surfers as well. So surfing plays really into it. And an earlier draft had Oliver Stone wanting to make the film, which is crazy because I hosted a screening of him of a movie called Heaven and Earth, and we got along well. And my wife said, "Hey, like, I know you're not done with this book, but just give it to Oliver Stone. Like, this is an old school Oliver Stone movie. It's like all testosterone, like Platoon, Wall Street style film." Like 3 days later, he's like, "What is this movie? Like, come to my house." And he threw a whole party for me with producers. And I thought, oh my God, like we're going to make $100 million surf movie, like a real surf movie, not like some fake bullshit, people who don't surf, because Oliver really likes surfing too. But he went on to this documentary and he wrote his memoir, and he just said, "Hey bro, like I'm an old man, like this is $100 million movie. I don't think I'm going to get to this. And I just want to say, like, I really support your vision." And,
wow.
And I'm still working on that book. And what I would like to do before it's a movie is to get it published. But I kind of have to finish a few sections. It's one of these long projects. But if not, we put it out ourselves. These days I can just put it on Amazon, start selling copies. But Bill Hamilton, when he came to early Kauai, and you guys had that talk, so I actually went and talked to him on my own. About that experience of raising Laird and being the only white guy. I mean, it wasn't as primal as a society we go to, but just, the outsider. People are generally, culturally scared of the outsider, and how you reckon with that. It was really interesting to me.
I loved that little story in Get Away If You Can, where talking about the natives.
Oh yeah, how they wanted to.
Yeah, it was like the natives. Was it in the Old West?
Yeah, it was in a book called Tribe that I read that they actually documented that most of the white so-called civilized people that went to the indigenous societies wanted to stay there.
Right. So for the listeners, the kind of purpose of the story, or the premise of the story, was the white invaders, essentially settlers, connect with the natives, and after the interaction, the natives go back to their old way of life. They retreat back to their native way of life, and the settlers continued to follow kind of what the natives were doing. The settlers did not go back to their old way of life, but they wanted to obviously be more like the natives. The invaders wanted to be more like the savages, quote unquote.
Yeah, when they had been transplanted or a woman was taken hostage, they almost universally preferred the simpler life, which is so interesting because we think of civilization as this, at least I did when I was younger, as an improving of the human condition. And maybe at some point it will, but I don't know that cities and working and 70-hour weeks, like it's not conducive. Everything I've studied about native cultures, the work weeks were short. It's like 20 hours of gathering food, hunting with your friends. That's fun, in Hawaiian culture, Polynesian culture, by the ocean for hours a day. I mean, sure, it was dangerous and you had to be prepared to fight. It was a pretty gnarly thing to be living. I'm sure if your king was an asshole, it wasn't so nice, but the lifestyle itself is pure.
I think what we all feel the desire is like, we want to have the resources to be able to do whatever we want. But then once we have the resources and the options, we retreat back to.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, Kauai, a great example of it is Andy Irons, comes from Kauai, small place, becomes 3-time world champ, has the opportunity to live anywhere, any kind of lifestyle he could come back to Kauai. Just want to live on Kauai. You know what I mean? Like totally, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
So,
definitely.
But you want those resources, which also is funny in the film, where it's like, once, I hate to spoil, but spoiler alert warning for anybody listening.
Yeah, say that. That's great.
Yeah. Once the husband kind of decides like, hey, living on the island, I'm going to go let my wife know I agree with her. Let's stay here. She's like, wait. Where's the boat? Let's get out of here. I just wanted you to kind of see it my way, but let's get out, so having that moment of like,
I find it so ironic that he didn't learn even to talk to his wife first. I find it so funny because I think it's so typical, like male driving. No, I don't need directions. I'm going to go. Totally. I always laughed at it. But yeah.
But in the end, honestly, we got everything we need right here. We just want to make love by the ocean. That's it.
Yeah, definitely. And surf, and she can smoke some good weed, and we can enjoy our life. I'm sure if we did a sequel, though, we could get into kind of like how difficult it would be to like figure out how to survive. But that's been explored so many times on film. I thought Castaway did a great job with that, with Tom Hanks, like step by step going from a modern dude to like figuring out how to remove his teeth, how to hunt. Like, it was brilliant. I wouldn't even want to touch that.
Having the one scene where you walk up with a big fish, that was good enough. That explained it all.
Yeah. You got all that Castaway just from that. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Final question. Whose boards are you riding while you're on Kauai?
Well, it's funny, man. I used to have a whole quiver here, but my friends got annoyed with me taking up their storage space. So now I'm just down to like one IPA. It's a Yoda from a couple of years ago. It's like a short board that's really loose, and I can come even in the summer when it's small and just know I have a board here. So I hate traveling with boards, and I like to just get there and know I have a board. But I'm probably going to have to get a step up. We're going to be here for all winter, and I'm wondering if I either go with like, just a Chung Perfect Hanalei board, or try to like tap into some John and get like a Ghost step up. And that's generally, I even when it's big, I like to be on the shortest board possible. But I've also like really messed myself up trying to surf waves that most mortals can't do on a short board, So it's like a balance for me. I don't manage the big boards well, they're so cumbersome. I don't paddle. I don't know how to time my paddles. I like to be right there and make a steep drop even on the bigger waves. But the wipeouts are painful. I'm not in the best of shape. So I'm reckoning on what the next board is. But
would you order a custom from a shaper there? Would you just go buy off the rack?
I'd probably go. They have like a board swap, which is great because everybody brings their used board. I love used boards. I don't like when you pay so much for a board and it's so precious, I like a board that's been tested. I don't mind dings and things like that. But I'll take that IPA. It's going to be big at Hanalei tomorrow. It'll be double, triple overhead, and I'll just try to pick off some smaller sets on it. It's so cruisy and fast and fun. And it's like my kind of California style board. Good. And I got to give a shout out to Guy Okazaki in California. I surf his boards in Venice. He's part of that whole circle where I met Domi. So it's like I have all his boards in storage, and Domi actually painted one. She actually is an artist, like in the movie, and she painted one, and then we glassed over the paint. So it's like it's the most beautiful board. And guy was like, "Don't surf this," but I said, "No, I want to surf it." And every time I put a ding in, we put like red tint in, so the dings are like the blood of the board. And someday we'll hang it on a wall. It's really pretty.
Was she responsible for the closing credits of the film?
No, we hired an artist for that. A guy named.
It was insane.
So good, right? It's a young up and comer. We didn't have the budget. Like a credit sequence like that on a big Hollywood film would be tens of thousands of dollars. But I found a nice artist online. I really did a lot of research. This guy, Garth, shout out to Garth, Art by Garth. If you need any visuals and surf movies, call this guy. He's just amazing to work with. And he just took him 2 months, put 2 months into that sequence. We wanted the movie's a bit hard, you know, so we just wanted to kind of end it with that beautiful song, LED, and images for you to say, oh, wow, cool. Like I can fantasize that they're living a good life on that island, you know, even if you're not showing that.
It was the coolest, best credit sequence I can remember seeing.
Oh, dude, that's so nice to hear.
Yeah, it was memorable.
Yeah.
Totally.
Really beautiful. Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, dude, enjoy your time, your downtime there, really, and revel in the completion of the project. And I hope that it just continues to grow and succeed. It's really, really good.
Thanks, man. And keep up the good work. Your work is like this oral history of surfing, and, you know, it's going to last forever. I really appreciate it.
Man, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be able to do it.
Take care, bud.
All right. You too.